Hey there, Mike Barbandica with Blue Line Property Management. Wanted to shoot this video and get it out to you just to talk about payments on properties. At this time of the month, we always get questions about payments. And there's a couple things that, just as a refresher, I wanted to get out to all of the owners. So first off, you'll see on your statements sometimes some things that look odd regarding security deposits, for lack of a better term. And we totally understand why they look odd. But here's basically what we normally or quite often see with those. We have tenants that seek out charities to help them with their security deposits. It's very common. And there's a ton of charities that do it. And they'll pay the entire amount. So for example, let's say a tenant comes in and they make a payment with a security deposit and they don't have the money. Maybe they borrowed the money or they put it on a credit card or however they got, the money to move into the property, because we won't let them move in without a security deposit. So they make this payment, but in essence, they've gone to a charity because it's not really money that they have, or, obviously physically they have it, but they're in need. And so they go to a charity and say, will you please help out? The charity will a lot of times either pay some or all of that for them and send us a check. So what you'll see is a reimbursement to the tenant so they can pay like their credit card back, for example, or their friend or relative or whatever, and then the charity amount is on file. So you may see, looks a little bit odd, I know, in the statements, but that's what it's regarding. We track it. We photocopy the check coming in. We put an explanation in our notes so we understand what's occurred. 2-3 years down the line with so many properties, maybe we don't remember, but that's why we document everything. And then the next one, when you get the next issue I wanted to talk about, when you get your statements or your payments, it may come a little piecemeal together, for lack of a better term. So for example, you have, let's say your tenant doesn't make all of their payment on the first of the month. Rent's due on the 1st, it's laid after the 5th for any contract that we write. Sometimes when they come in with existing contracts, it's different because, who knows what you had before. We have people that come in with existing contracts and, sometimes they're due on the 6th, then they're due on the 10th. And then when we get them into one of our contracts, we fix that and put it where it's due on the 1st, late after the 5th. So that being said, let's say the tenant makes a partial payment. They pay half of the rent, and we see that occur. They pay half of it. Or they're on Section 8. Section 8 pays a portion, and the tenant pays theirs later. As money comes in, I can't hold the money in an account for you because I don't know when that tenant's going to pay their portion. So between the first, several days of the month, between the 1st and the 6th, the 1st and the 5th, depending if it falls on a weekend, we're constantly monitoring to see what money comes into the account. And if you have money that comes in, we try to get it out to you as soon as possible. That's why it may seem odd that let's say your rent's $3,000 and you're getting a one payment for $1,900. Maybe that's Section 8 money, or maybe that's money that the tenant paid $1,900, but they didn't have the rest of it. But they're going to have it maybe in a couple of days. And then they make a, $1,100 payment on top of that. You may see different payments. And that's why every owner's statement says we're still waiting on county monies or we're still waiting on tenant. And that's a boilerplate email that goes out that, because we manage so many properties, it's impossible for me to write. I would be writing emails for 4 days saying, I got your money, here's what it is. So we have a boilerplate language that goes out. And the reason that's on there is just to remind you, if you did not receive your full rent amount, that's why. So what we do is on the last day of the month, every tenant gets a reminder email. Rent is due on the 1st, it's late after the 5th, and we have to receive it in our hands. Because they pay electronically, if a tenant waits right up until the last day, the banks process that through their system. So maybe their bank is processing as well as our bank is processing. So it's not instantaneous. We encourage every tenant to avoid any late charges to get the rent paid immediately. So it's actually in our hands. But if you don't see it show up on the 5th, but your statement shows that the money is there, that means it's still being processed through the banking system. Because of everything that's gone on in the country and money being essentially really looked at by the government, there are so many checks and balances with rental properties to make sure that there are no issues with money. That's why it comes into the system. The bank that it's going from has checks and balances. Our system has checks and balances. And then going into our bank, they have checks and balances. It's not instantaneous like somebody walking in with a check. But by doing that, we avoid checks that are bouncing. We don't have that issue. We're avoiding most late payments because it's all done electronically. And a lot of these tenants just set it up where it's automatic. It's an ACH automatic. And they have 3 options to pay, 3 ways to pay. So hopefully it clears it up. If you see something odd on your statement regarding security deposits, quite often it's the tenant went to a charity and then they were reimbursed monies, and that's why they were reimbursed, or that's why it shows up on your statement. And then secondly, if you're not getting a full payment, you're getting a little bit here, a little bit there, it's because legally I can't hold the money. I have a certain time period that I have to get it out of our account. And we self-audit with an independent company every 30 days. And so I have to stay in compliance, which keeps you as an owner in compliance. So that way you don't ever have to worry about it too, of being held liable for anything, because you have a property management company that's following state and federal law, and we're independently auditing, and we pay a company to come in and audit all of our books once a year. So we do it every 30 days, and then we have an auditing company up and above that comes in and audits also once a year. So that way you know everything's clean, everything's in compliance. So again, if you see little bits coming in here and little bits coming in there, it could be a couple of things. If your tenant's on Section 8, maybe Section 8 paid and the tenant hasn't yet. Maybe if the tenant paid, their money hasn't cleared yet, or their first payment cleared and maybe their second payment didn't. Could be several reasons as to why. But that's why we send out the statement too, so you can see everything that's in there. So any questions, always feel free to reach out. And again, I'm going to be honest, I'm not always available on the phone for a phone conversation. That's why we have fantastic staff that I work with, and you can always reach out and talk. And I'm just, again, going to be brutally honest. Are you always going to get me on the phone? No, you're not. There's only one of me, but I have a great staff that I work with that all day long, they're on the phone, they're explaining things. And if they don't know the answer, they'll reach out to me. But I'm at properties quite often. I'm doing inspections, I'm doing walkthroughs, I'm meeting with tenants, I'm meeting with owners. So it's not something, and I just, again, want to be brutally honest. Do you really want a property management company that manages so few properties that the owner can literally sit there by the phone waiting for it to ring? You know, when that was the case, when back in those days, well, it was a struggle to make ends meet. But now that we manage so many properties, it's a good problem to have. But I had to bring in additional help to take phone calls and things like that. And I do assure you, every person that calls in, the staff lets me know every time, but I'm not always in the office. Quite often, most of my days I'm spending out at properties, doing walkthroughs, doing drive-bys, talking with tenants, talking with owners, serving notices, collecting rent, testifying in eviction cases when needed. And then I also do for local attorneys expert testimony, which really helps us out on the property management side as well, because when we have to go in and testify for, say, an eviction, we already have an established relationship with quite a few attorneys within the court system. So it works out really well for everybody. Thanks again, and have a great day. I hope this helps. Bye-bye.